Blood sprayed from the neck stump as Will's sword cleaved through the practice dummy, slicing it clean in two. To the Vorkarians' warriors watching, it was a display of pure savagery, raw, brute strength untamed by the finesse and control of magic. Will knew what they thought of him. Just a human mercenary, a blunt weapon to be wielded and discarded, the only human fool enough to accept this contract. Expendable. But the colony world of Vorlar Prime needed defending against the Thaxian raiders, and coin was coin, even if it meant working alongside arrogant pricks like Korvac, the Vorkarian commander, who sneered at Will's lack of magical ability. The younger warriors seemed somewhat impressed by his swordsmanship, at least. Korvac just glowered, resentment seething behind his eyes. To him, Will was a liability, useless without magic. Will had faced doubt and disdain his whole life, the only human born without a shred of magical talent. But he had honed his skill with a blade to a razor's edge. He didn't need magic to kill. As they prepared for the imminent attack, tension crackled between Will and Korvac, the Vorkarian questioning Will's very presence. Divisions before battle were dangerous. They needed to fight as one if any of them hoped to survive the coming Thaxian onslaught. But Korvac's pride might just get them all killed. Magic be damned. It would fall to Will and his simple steel to turn the tide, for if he failed, Vorlar Prime would fall, and Will would be just another corpse among the countless dead. Thaxian ships descended upon Vorlar Prime like a swarm of locusts, ready to devour everything in their path. The Vorkarian warriors stood at attention, magic crackling in their palms as they awaited Korvac's command. "The Thaxians may have numbers, but we have magic on our side," Korvac declared, his voice booming across the battlefield. "We will crush them with the power of our spells. Will, you stay back and support us from the rear." Will gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on his sword hilt. Once again Korvac was underestimating him, treating him as nothing more than a backup plan. But there was no time to argue. The Thaxians were nearly upon them. Suddenly, a strange hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The Vorkarians looked around in confusion, their magic flickering and sputtering out like candles in the wind. "What's happening?" one of the warriors cried out, panic creeping into his voice. "Our magic, it's gone," another shouted. Korvac's face paled as he realized the gravity of the situation. The Thaxians had brought a new weapon, something that could nullify their greatest advantage. Chaos erupted among the Vorkarian ranks as they found themselves powerless against the approaching enemy. Some dropped their weapons and fled, while others stood frozen in fear. But Will remained calm, his mind racing as he assessed the battlefield. He had trained for this moment his entire life, honing his skills with a blade until they were second nature. "Form up," he shouted, his voice cutting through the panic like a knife. "Tight defensive formation, use the terrain to our advantage." The Vorkarians looked to Will in surprise, but something in his tone compelled them to obey. They quickly fell into formation, their swords at the ready as they prepared for the Thaxian onslaught. Will moved to the front, his sword gleaming in the sunlight. He could feel the eyes of the Vorkarians on his back, their doubt and fear palpable. But he pushed it aside, focusing only on the enemy before him. The Thaxians crashed into their ranks like a tidal wave, their weapons clashing against Vorkarian steel. Will moved like a whirlwind, his sword a blur as he cut through the enemy with unmatched precision and speed. The Vorkarians rallied around him, their confidence growing with each fallen foe. They fought with a ferocity they had never known before, their blades singing a song of death and victory. Slowly but surely, the tide of the battle began to turn. The Thaxians, caught off guard by the Vorkarians' sudden change in tactics, found themselves on the defensive. Will pressed forward, his sword never stopping as he carved a path through the enemy ranks. Korvac fought beside him, his earlier disdain forgotten in the heat of battle. Together they pushed the Thaxians back, their combined might proving too much for the raiders to handle. The enemy began to retreat, their numbers dwindling with each passing moment. Korvac's frustration mounted as he watched Will take command of the battlefield. The human's swordsmanship was impressive, but it galled Korvac to see his own warriors following the orders of a magicless mercenary. His pride stung as he realized his own magical abilities were now useless against the Thaxian device. In a desperate bid to regain control, Korvac gathered a group of his most loyal followers. "We must destroy that accursed device," he shouted over the din of battle. "Follow me, and we shall restore our rightful power." With a battle cry, Korvac charged towards the Thaxian lines, his warriors close behind. They cut a path through the enemy ranks, their sights set on the strange humming device that had rendered their magic useless. But as they drew closer, the Thaxians suddenly parted ranks, revealing a deadly trap. Dozens of raiders emerged from hidden positions, surrounding Korvac and his warriors on all sides. The Vorkarians found themselves cut off and outnumbered, their escape route blocked by a wall of Thaxian steel. Will, in the midst of his own battle, saw the impending danger. He knew that Korvac, for all his flaws, was a crucial part of the Vorkarian defense. If he fell, the entire battle might be lost. Without hesitation, Will rallied a small group of Vorkarians to his side. "With me," he shouted, charging towards Korvac's position. "We must save them." The Vorkarians hesitated for only a moment before following Will into the fray. They cut through the Thaxian ambush like a hot knife through butter, their swords flashing in the sunlight as they carved a path to their beleaguered comrades. Will fought like a man possessed, his sword a blur of steel as he cut down Thaxian after Thaxian. He moved with a speed and precision that even the most skilled Vorkarian warriors could not match, his blade always finding its mark. At last, they reached Korvac and his warriors, who were fighting desperately against the overwhelming odds. Will and his group crashed into the Thaxian ranks from behind, catching them off guard and giving Korvac's party a chance to regroup. Together, they fought their way back to the main Vorkarian lines, Will always at the forefront, his sword leading the way. Korvac could only watch in amazement as the human mercenary single-handedly turned the tide of the ambush, saving his life and the lives of his warriors. As they reached safety, Korvac found himself face to face with Will. For a moment the two men stared at each other, the weight of what had just happened hanging between them. "I thank you," Korvac said at last, his voice gruff with emotion. "You saved our lives out there." Will nodded, his face grim. "We're all in this together," he said simply. "We stand or fall as one." Korvac looked at the human with new eyes, his earlier resentment and disdain slowly giving way to a grudging respect. Perhaps there was more to this mercenary than he had first believed. But there was no time to dwell on such thoughts. The battle still raged around them, and the Thaxians would not rest until Vorlar Prime was theirs. Will and Korvac exchanged a brief nod before turning back to the fight, their swords ready to meet the enemy once more. A thunderous roar erupted from the Thaxian ranks as their commander strode onto the battlefield, his eyes blazing with arcane power. He surveyed the carnage with a sneer, his gaze settling on Korvac. The Vorkarian leader stood tall, his sword at the ready, but the absence of magic in his eyes was evident. "Korvac," the Thaxian commander bellowed, "face me in single combat. Let us see if your vaunted Vorkarian magic can stand against the might of the Thaxians." Korvac's jaw clenched, his pride warring with the knowledge that his magic was useless. He glanced at Will, who nodded almost imperceptibly. With a deep breath, Korvac stepped forward. "I accept your challenge, Thaxian scum." The two warriors circled each other, their blades glinting in the sun. The Thaxian commander grinned, his sword wreathed in crackling energy. He lunged forward, his blade moving with blinding speed. Korvac parried the blow, but the force of it sent shockwaves up his arm. They traded blows, sparks flying as their swords clashed. But without his magic, Korvac was at a disadvantage. The Thaxian commander pressed his attack, driving Korvac back with each powerful strike. Korvac's sword arm began to tire, his parries growing sluggish. The Thaxian commander saw his opening and lunged forward, his blade aimed at Korvac's heart. Time seemed to slow as the sword descended, Korvac's eyes widening in the face of his impending doom. Suddenly, a blur of movement intercepted the blow. Will stood before Korvac, his sword locked with the Thaxian commander's. The human mercenary grinned, his eyes alight with the thrill of battle. "Why don't you pick on someone your own size?" Will taunted, shoving the Thaxian commander back. The Thaxian snarled, his eyes narrowing. "You dare interfere, human? You have no magic, no power." Will laughed. "I don't need magic to beat you, Thaxian dog. I have skill." The two warriors clashed, their swords moving in a deadly dance. The Thaxian commander was fast, his blade imbued with magical energy, but Will was faster, his sword a blur as he parried and countered with lightning precision. They fought across the battlefield, their duel a spectacle of raw skill and power. The Thaxian commander grew frustrated, his attacks becoming more reckless as he tried to land a blow on the nimble human. Will saw his chance. As the Thaxian overextended on a thrust, Will sidestepped and brought his blade down on the commander's sword arm. The Thaxian howled in pain, his sword clattering to the ground. Will pressed his advantage, his sword at the Thaxian's throat. "Yield," he demanded, his voice hard. The Thaxian commander glared at him, hatred burning in his eyes, but he had no choice. With a snarl of frustration, he raised his hands in surrender. A cheer went up from the Vorkarian ranks as they saw their enemy defeated. The Thaxians, seeing their commander bested, began to flee the battlefield in droves. Korvac approached Will, his expression a mix of gratitude and respect. "You saved my life, Orcs," he said, his voice gruff. "I was wrong about you, human. You may not have magic, but you have something far more valuable: honor and courage." Will clasped Korvac's arm, a warrior's greeting. "We all have our strengths," he said with a smile. "Magic or not, we fight as one." Together, they turned to face the retreating Thaxians, their swords raised in victory. The battle for Volar Prime was won, but the war was far from over. Will knew that more challenges lay ahead, but with the Vorkarians at his side, he was ready to face them head-on. The cheers of the Vorkarian warriors filled the air as they celebrated their hard-fought victory over the Thaxian raiders. Will stood among them, his sword still gripped tightly in his hand, as the weight of their triumph slowly sank in. He had fought alongside these warriors, bled with them, and now they reveled in the glory of their shared success. Korvac approached Will, his eyes filled with a newfound respect for the human mercenary. He clasped Will's shoulder, his voice carrying over the din of the celebration. "Will, your bravery and skill in battle have shown me the error of my ways. I was wrong to doubt you, to belittle your lack of magical abilities. You have proven yourself a true warrior and a valuable ally to the Vorkarian people." Will met Korvac's gaze, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I only did what needed to be done. Magic or not, we all have a part to play in defending what we hold dear." Korvac nodded, his expression solemn. "Indeed. And that is why I wish to offer you a place among us, not as a mercenary, but as a fellow Vorkarian warrior. Your skills and knowledge would be invaluable in training our people to fight without relying solely on magic." Will's eyes widened, the weight of Korvac's offer sinking in. To be accepted as an equal among the Vorkarian warriors was no small feat, especially for a human with no magical abilities. He felt a swell of pride in his chest as he grasped Korvac's arm in a warrior's embrace. "I would be honored to fight alongside you and your people, Korvac. Together, we will make Volar Prime a force to be reckoned with." In the weeks that followed, Will worked tirelessly to train the Vorkarian warriors in the art of non-magical combat. He drilled them in swordsmanship, hand-to-hand combat, and tactical maneuvers, honing their skills to a razor's edge. The Vorkarians took to his teachings with enthusiasm, their confidence growing with each passing day. But their newfound peace was not to last. The Thaxian Confederacy, still smarting from their defeat at the hands of the Vorkarians and their human ally, launched a massive retaliatory strike against Volar Prime. The sky darkened with the silhouettes of Thaxian warships, their weapons primed, and ready to unleash destruction upon the colony. Will and the Vocarians fought with every ounce of strength and skill they possessed, their swords and newly acquired combat techniques put to the ultimate test. They held the line against wave after wave of Thaxian soldiers, their determination unwavering in the face of overwhelming odds. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that the sheer number of Thaxian forces would eventually overwhelm them. Will, his armor battered and his sword slick with the blood of his enemies, turned to Korvac, his eyes filled with grim determination. "Korvac, you must order the evacuation of the colony. Get your people to safety. I will hold the line and buy you as much time as I can." Korvac's heart wrenched at the thought of leaving Will behind, but he knew the human was right. The survival of the Vocarian people had to come first. With a heavy heart, he gave the order to retreat, watching as his warriors boarded the waiting ships. As the Vocarian fleet lifted off, Korvac stood at the viewport, his eyes fixed on the lone figure standing defiantly against the Thaxian horde. Will's sword flashed in the chaos of battle, his movements a blur of speed and precision as he cut down enemy after enemy. But even the mightiest warrior could not stand alone forever. Korvac watched, his heart heavy with grief, as Will was finally overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of the Thaxian forces. The human sword fell from his grasp as he was swallowed up by the sea of enemies, his final stand a testament to his unwavering courage and sacrifice. As the Vocarian ships fled into the depths of space, Korvac made a solemn vow to honor Will's memory. He would rebuild the Vocarian civilization, create a lasting legacy that would ensure Will's sacrifice was not in vain. The human mercenary had shown them the true meaning of bravery and selflessness, and Korvac would make certain that his name would be remembered for generations to come. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.